Into this video, guys, let's talk about something very important: exercising an options contract, how to do it and why most of the time you shouldn't, and the rare cases where you should. So first of all, I'm going to go over to Bank of America and I'm going to utilize this stock for this demo here. So let's go over to the options for Bank of America here. And the first thing I want to quickly talk about is buying calls and buying puts and what this really means. Most people, the way they see it is you should buy a call when you think the stock is going up and you should buy a put when you think the stock is going down. But it goes much further than that. So let's say you want to buy a call. Let's say I wanted to buy this call option right here. What does this actually truly mean? So buying a call gives the buyer the right but not the obligation to buy 100 shares of the underlying stock at the strike price up to the expiration. So if I buy this call option at the $42 strike, what this means is that if I wanted to, I could exercise this option here and I could buy 100 shares of Bank of America for $42 a share before the end of the trading day on May 14th. Now, what's very important to note here is that I, as the owner, have the right to exercise it, but I'm not obligated to exercise it. It's your choice, and most people don't. And that's what we're going to talk about, is when you should and when you shouldn't. Similarly, for buying a put option, right? If I wanted to buy this put right here, what does this mean? This gives me the right but not the obligation to sell 100 shares of the underlying stock at the strike price up to the expiration date. So if I had 100 shares of Bank of America and I bought this put option here with a $42 strike expiring May 14th, if I wanted to, I could exercise it, sell my 100 shares of Bank of America at $42 each share before the end of the trading day on May 14th. But again, most people don't exercise. Instead, they close the position. How do you close a position? You close it by selling it back to the market. If I buy this put option, rather than exercising it, what most people do to close this trade is they sell this back. So you would sell that exact same put to close this transaction. Okay. Now, one important thing to note here is that there are two sides to an options contract. There's a buyer, there's a seller. So if you go back to calls, right, the person who's buying has rights. The seller of the call has obligations. So if you're the one selling call options, you as the call seller have the obligation to deliver 100 shares at the strike if the buyer exercises. If you're the one selling a put, the put seller, you have the obligation to purchase 100 shares at the strike if the buyer exercises. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Now let's quickly show you guys how you would actually exercise an option if you're buying a call or buying a put. Now Robinhood does have documentation here that you can use. I'm going to show you guys quickly. Now here's some quick information to note. If you exercise your option between 12 a.m. and 4 p.m. Eastern Time before the expiration date, your exercise will be submitted immediately. You can't cancel it. If you exercise your option after 4 p.m. Eastern Time, it will be queued for the next trading day. You have until 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time to cancel the order. If it's the expiration date, you won't be able to submit an early exercise in the app after 4 p.m. Eastern Time. If you want to submit one, you'll need to submit an email request to the options support team. So again, there is documentation here, but let's go over here to this put option I bought on AT&T. So this is part of a multi-leg strategy I'm currently utilizing, but I can show you guys with this put option here. So ultimately, I bought a put on AT&T at the 32.50 strike. So again, what this really means is that if I had 100 shares of AT&T, I have the right but not the obligation to sell 100 shares at 32.50 a share. So if I did have 100 shares and I wanted to, for whatever reason, sell them at 32.50 a share, which this allows me to do, I could exercise this put option. So what I would do is I would come down here, I would click on exercise this option, and then you would just follow the steps that are shown to you on the screen. Again, most people aren't going to do that. Most people are going to sell to close. They're going to sell this option back to the market, sell it to somebody else, and then that person would have the right but not the obligation to sell 100 shares at 32.50. So again, most people are going to sell their contract to close out of the transaction. So let's talk about reasons why you would not want to exercise here. So let's go back to Robinhood here, and let's start with let's look at these buy call options here. Let's start with some very simple reasons why you wouldn't want to exercise. So to exercise a call, right? So again, let's imagine I bought this call here. To exercise this call, I would need to have enough money to buy 100 shares of Bank of America at $42 a share. I would need $4,200. I don't have $4,200 right now. And if you're buying calls on stocks like Tesla, Amazon, Google, chances are most people don't have enough money to buy 100 shares of those stocks. Similarly, to if you're buying a put and you want to exercise it, you need to have 100 shares of that particular stock in order to exercise a put that you're buying. And again, most people aren't going to have 100 shares of stocks like Tesla, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, etc. Right? So there's some really simple reasons why most people don't. Now let's go further beyond that. Time value, right? Time value. That's time left until expiration. This factors into how much an option costs. And we can see that here. So for example, this option here at the $42 strike expiring tomorrow, this costs $22. If I go a week out to May 21st, this costs $65 at the same strike. It costs, over $40 more. Why? Because this one, if we further out date, has more time value. And so let me show you guys here a couple of examples. First of all, it never makes sense, really. I mean, there's very rare cases where it makes sense to exercise an out of the money option. So for calls, out of the money is where the strike price is above the share price. Why? Well, it's pretty straightforward, right? If I buy this call at the $42 strike and I exercise it again, that means I can buy 100 shares of Bank of America at $42 a share. Well, Bank of America right now is at $41.85. Why would I want to buy Bank of America for a higher price at $42 a share? It's only worth $41.85 right now. That doesn't make sense. So it never really makes sense to exercise out of the money options. Now let's go in the money, right? In the money is where the strike price is below the share price for calls here. So what about here? What if I bought this $41 strike option here? Does it make sense to exercise it right now? Well, let's take a look here. So if I buy this call, I'm paying $125 or so. Right, so I pay $125, and then let's say I exercise this right away. Well, that means I would be able to purchase 100 shares of Bank of America at $41 a share. And since Bank of America is at $41.85, I could sell my 100 shares right away. And since I'm buying at 41 and I'm selling at $41.85, I'm making an $85 profit. But remember, you paid $125. So even though you made an $85 profit by buying at 41 and selling at $41.85, you are down $125 because that's how much you paid for this option. So you're actually down $40, right? And that's that time value that we're talking about. There's $40 in time value here. That's why it wouldn't make sense to buy these in the money options, because they have time value, guys. So that is the first thing I wanted to talk about there. Now, let's talk about a couple of other things here. There's also increased risk when exercising an options contract. So what do I mean by that? So for example, if I buy this $41 strike again, say I bought this option again, right? I'm paying $125. If I buy this call, when you buy an option, the most you can lose is the amount that you paid. I'm paying $125 to buy this option. So let's say, for example, that on May 21st, I'm still holding this option and something happens where Bank of America drops a lot, right? Some sort of negative news. Let's say Bank of America drops to $38 a share. Well, if it's May 21st and Bank of America drops to around $38 a share, this is going to be pretty worthless as a call option. And so you'd probably lose all of your money. You'd lose about $125 because that's how much you're paying. However, if you had exercised this option to buy 100 shares and you own 100 shares at $41 a share, and again, May 21st comes and Bank of America drops to 38, well, not only did you lose $125 because you exercised that option, but now Bank of America is at 38. You bought each one at 41. You're also down $300 on your shares. So now instead of only losing $125 for buying an option, you're actually down $425, right? $125 which you used to buy the option, and $300 since you bought the 100 shares at 41, and now each share is at $38. The other thing to note, and this doesn't apply much to Robinhood because Robinhood doesn't have commission fees, but transaction costs, right? It costs less to sell an option back, to close out of the option, to just sell it, than if you exercise it, which you're usually going to pay a fee for and other brokers, and then a second commission to sell the shares, right? So in other words, if I buy an option and I just want to close it by selling it, I'd only have to pay one commission fee. If I exercise it, I'm paying a fee by doing that. And then to sell my shares, I may have to pay another fee for that. So transaction costs are also something you should definitely be aware of. Now, when should we exercise an options contract? Well, there's really two main exceptions where people do exercise an options contract. One is exercising a call to capture the dividend. And I mentioned this in a lot of my other videos. Is, if there's an ex-dividend date, selling an option is usually not a good thing to do during that week because you may be assigned early. Why? Because the buyer of a call option is exercising the call to capture the dividend. The other reason is an option that is very, very deep in the money. For example, if someone had bought a call that's, for example, very, very deep in the money. So let's say someone had bought this $18 one, right? It may be very, very hard to sell it at fair value because there's just not that many sellers down here. Or there's not many buyers, right? If you bought this call deep in the money and you're trying to sell it, there may not be a lot of people that are trying to buy it. So it may be very hard to sell it for a fair value. In this case, what most people would do is they'd exercise their right to purchase those 100 shares at the strike. And then once they have those 100 shares, sell the shares instead, and then get more money off of that. You really kind of have to make the math and see which one you'd make more money, whether it's selling it at a lower fair value or exercising the contract, getting the shares, and then selling the shares immediately. So that's really the only times you'd want to really exercise an options contract. So anyways, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Check out the Discord, link to it in the description below. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys next time.